Sorry it's crowded. We didn't expect as many people to care about their wetlands, but we're glad you do. So, my name is Esther Scarborough, and I'm the floodplain administrator for the county. And the two gentlemen here today with us is, on your right is Kenny James, and on your left is John Davidson. And we've just about driven those folks crazy. So they've graciously decided to come here and educate us more than what they already have. But before we get started, I'd like to do a little bit of housekeeping. If you didn't get one of the little pamphlets like this, let me borrow yours, please. Let us know, and we'll have more on the way out. And I'll try to get some printed up while we're here. I think Amanda may be going to print up some more. But this is what they're going to be talking about today. And on the second page is their information, their contact information. And on the last page is a map that I just wanted to let everyone know that if you have any situations that you want to check on floodplains, we have all of it on Google Earth, just about any floodplain in Hardin County, and we also have some wetlands maps that they're going to talk about later that may or may not be very accurate. But that's all in this little brochure, so you can get a copy of that before you leave.
Well, you're in trouble now.
I'm setting them up. But before we do that, the restrooms are right down the hall to the right, and there's also coffee and cookies in Judge McDaniel's lobby. So you're welcome to help yourself with those.
I baked those cookies, so.
He did. He just wiped all the flour off his face. But, and again, this is Judge Wayne McDaniels. This is our county judge. And I believe somewhere, if he didn't leave, our retired judge, Billy Caraway, is here. Oh, he's back over in the corner.
Back in the corner.
And we have Commissioner Kirkendall is here, and Commissioner Roberts. Our Emergency Management Coordinator, Teresa Wigley. We figured it was an emergency today because we didn't know how to work the recording. Also, if you don't remember everything from this meeting, it will be posted on the county website. We are recording it. And I will try to, if you have questions that they can't hear on the speaker, I'll try to repeat your questions because it picks it up in this microphone. So we'll have all of that on the website. Does anybody have any questions before we get started? Okay. Kenny and John, you have the floor.
That's scary. I have a tendency to talk fast sometimes, especially when I'm nervous, and I'm real good at one-on-one, but when you put a whole flock of folks in front of me, I get a little nervous. So if I start going too fast, slow me down. The other thing, I work for the government. All right, that's a pro and that's a con. I understand that. Many times we use a lot of acronyms. If I start using an acronym, catch me, because I slip into government speak real quick. And I want to make sure that folks understand the best I can. I cannot tell you how much I appreciate y'all making time to come. There's a lot of myths, a lot of horror stories about this 500-pound gorilla called the Corps of Engineers and how they want to do everything and anything. What we're going to try to do is tell you the truth, debunk some of the myths. And it ain't all going to be pretty, but it's going to be the truth. So you're going to hear how the cow eats the cabbage. And that's the bottom line, straightforward. I ain't shy. If you got strongly held opinions, you're entitled to them. It's America, by God, and you need to have that opinion. All right? That's pretty much us. John and I have been working together for what? 2 decades?
25 years.
With the Corps of Engineers. We come from different backgrounds. Basically, give you a little insight to who you're going to deal with first. My background is I'm a wildlife biologist. Did my graduate work in aquatic biology. I used to be a park ranger and a naturalist, and then I worked for National Marine Fisheries for a while, and then I worked for the Corps of Engineers, and I've done all sorts of different things. And some of you folks may have seen me over here after doing some of the hurricane recovery. This area's been very blessed with a lot of opportunities to restore and rebuild and make things better. And John?
I went to Texas A&M at Galveston and have a marine biology degree. And I worked for National Marine Fisheries for 3.5 years, and I've been working in the Corps for 25 years doing the regulatory stuff.
So we've been around for a little bit. I'm the chief of the compliance and enforcement section. John is my team leader. We do a lot of the field work itself. So when we come out and we're talking about identifying the wetlands, we're usually the ones, as you can probably tell by looking at us, we were out in the field this morning tromping around doing some stuff. And it's always easier to get things to be proactive, to look at it beforehand instead of being reactive afterward. Because when I put on my enforcement hat, it's usually a little more one-sided and people are a little more uppity and concerned about what's coming back and forth. So again, I applaud that everybody's coming in here, and let's talk about what we can do to keep me putting that enforcement hat on, and where we're at, and what we're doing, okay? Anytime you got a question, let me know, please, or John, one of the two. Just don't throw anything at us, it might scare me. Long story short, as I was telling you, we're from the Corps of Engineers Galveston District. Our headquarters is on Galveston Island. This is the territory we cover, from Mexico to just inside of Louisiana. Everything you see color-wise is part of the Galveston District territory. That's what we handle. That's a lot of territory. How many people do we have on staff, John, in compliance?
6 or 7.
Yeah, we're very blessed with opportunities to excel. So, when somebody calls and they may get a little frustrated with us, we always have an answering machine on. We will return that call. It may not come back as quick as you like because we're out in the field or doing something like that effect, but we will get back in touch with you. And if you don't hear something from any of my staff or anybody up there within a week at the longest, you call me. I'll make sure that I'll ring a bell, one way or another, either theirs or yours, but a bell will be rung. All right? So we're very blessed with covering all these areas. And if you live along the Texas coast, you know there's a lot of opportunities, a lot of different ecosystems in there. You want it?
Yeah.
And I'm gonna go over here, that way I don't block it. Two primary authorities at the Corps regulatory. The Corps of Engineers is a big entity in itself. There's a federal side, which handles all the federal projects, the drainage, the ship channels, things to that effect. And then there's the regulatory side. The regulatory side is the ones that deal with primarily with Section 404 of the Clean Water Act and Section 10 of the Rivers and Harbors Act. And this affects mom and dads. It affects your backyard, potentially. It affects the rivers. It affects the piers, the docks, things that you're building. All right? And I'm going to try to put this as lay speak as possible without sounding too much like a bureaucrat. And it's going to be hard for me to do because I've been doing this for so long. Section 404 of the Clean Water Act. It regulates the discharge of dredged and or fill material into any water of the United States. That can include wetlands. And we're going to talk a little bit more as we go through the presentation of what a wetland is. How do you determine a wetland? Is it an urban myth, or do you pick up the magic 8 ball and turn it upside down and say, is it a wetland, yes or no? No. We're going to talk about the science behind that. So it regulates that discharge. It says that you need a permit from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers prior to discharging dredged or fill material into those aquatic resources. Otherwise, you're in violation of a federal law. Let that sink in for a second. Section 10 of the Rivers and Harbors Act. It says any work and or structures in or affecting any navigable water of the United States. Holy buckets, what does that mean? It means, what would you come up with, about 4 or 5 different waterways along here.
There's 4 navigable waters in Hardin County. The Neches River, Pine Island Bayou, Village Creek, and Village Slough. Those are the 4
Major
navigable waters.
And what it states is if any work in or affecting it, you go to put a boat slip in there, got to get a permit for it. You go to put a pipeline underneath it, got to get a permit for it. Go to put a cantilever deck over the top, got to get a permit for it. I go to dredge it out, make it a little deeper, got to get a permit for it. That's what Section 10 states. And that law's been around for quite some time, since 1899. Okay? Those are the 2 primary ones that will affect you up in here. I can get you caught up in a couple others, but all that's going to do is confusion. It didn't affect you directly. Everybody should have that drawing. It's a nice, pretty little drawing to try to put it as simple and as easy as possible. Remember what we were just talking about, Section 10? This is those navigable waterways. Any work and or structures and or affecting it. You got to get a permit from the Corps of Engineers. And we'll talk about how do you get a permit prior to doing it. All right, now here comes one of those big uh-oh moments. Does every application get permitted? Answer's no. And we'll talk about the procedure that goes through that. And the reason is, the majority of them, greater than 99% of the permit applications we issue well, less than 1% are denied. Now, that's a biased study, a biased result, because many of those are withdrawn if somebody sees that it's getting ready to be denied by the colonel. I work for a full-burn colonel, so does John. He's a green suiter, all that, he, she, right now it's a he. That's who we answer to, so we're civilians for the Army. But it can be denied. But many people, if they get an inkling that something's going to be denied, they'll withdraw it, because they don't want to proceed forward with it. So that 1%, I don't want that to skew your concept and say, well, heck, they're gonna agree on everything. It's not quite that easy. And we're gonna go through and explain some of those protocols. Section 404 comes, as you can see, goes further up through these waterway areas themselves. Now, they can go quite a ways further up. We will, being civil servants, we get recalls, somebody complains, somebody expresses concern about somebody else doing something on a property. They don't have to tell us who they are. Many times they're anonymous. But because we're civil servants and we work for your tax dollar, we owe it a thorough investigation. So we get to investigate all of those purported things. And the majority of those are myths. There's no violation there. But we still owe due diligence and investigation. So just because you hear from John, me, one of the staff, said, hey, we've got a purported investigation, we understand you're the property owner, can you give us some details? We're trying to ferret out the facts. It doesn't mean that you're guilty. You're innocent until proven guilty. And that still holds true. We're going to investigate and gather the facts accordingly. All right? That's really, really, really important because it is your property. What is fill material? Some of this is legalese for the lawyers and judges in here. I'll apologize ahead of time, but material that has the effect of replacing any water with dry land or changing the bottom elevation. If you go in and you take and you throw a bunch of mulch in it, that's a fill. If it's an aquatic resource, it's within our jurisdiction. If you go in and bulldoze it, land clear it, that's a fill. You're filling areas in to make it land level. If I come in and pour concrete slab over it, that's a fill. If I put a roadway across it, that's a fill. Any of these things. One of the ones that people have a misconception about is it's a forested area. You guys got a lot of pretty trees over here. A lot of forested areas. And they go in and they bulldoze it. Land cleared. There's fill associated with that. If it's an aquatic resource within our jurisdiction, you need a permit prior to doing it. Otherwise, you're in violation of a federal law. I like pictures. Wetlands. Wetland is, for lack of better terms, put in simple speak, is no more than a vegetated water. If I got vegetation poking up through the top and it's a water, it's going to be a wetland more than likely. Now we're going to talk about how we have to determine that. There's scientific evidence and all of that good stuff we're going to go into. But here's an example of a wetland area. And wetlands are often intermingled among upland areas. It doesn't have to be, there's no size limit. Wetlands don't say that, all right, it's 4 square feet. That can't be a wetland. That dog don't hunt. Wetlands come in all sizes, all shapes, all sizes. What is a wetland? Here's the technical definition. Areas that are inundated or saturated by surface or groundwater at a frequency and duration sufficient to support under normal circumstances and do support a prevalence of vegetation typically adapted for life in a vegetated or saturated soil. Wow. How do you do that? Hold up a magic card and think, all right, this is how we're going to do it. Is it saturated? Is it there for long enough? Is it under normal circumstances? There's this wonderful tool. John, you want to hold that book up for a second? This is the book that we have to use to identify wetlands in this specific georegion. And it's called the Regional Supplement to the Corps of Engineers Delineation Manual, Atlantic Gulf Coast Regional Supplement. It is not voodoo science. There is some science behind it and what we have to go and take a look at. But the key things that you're going to end up hearing over and over again to identify a wetland has to have predominantly hydrophytic vegetation, hydric soils. Very important, you have to have the hydrology at or near the surface for sufficient duration to make it wet. Otherwise, it's not a wetland. And it has to be under normal circumstances. Because many of you folks already know from living in this area, we go through these frog stranglers to extreme droughts. So you've got to be able to identify a wetland in an extreme drought, or just vice versa. If I have 48 inches of rain in a short period of time, and I'm still trying to do a wetland determination, because you saw the area we're covering, how do I make that determination? This manual helps us do that, and it's based off science. Wetland, pretty straightforward. Nice, see the fluting that comes out. Got watermarks on trees, you got water standing around. Pretty straightforward. Areas just like that when it's not as straightforward, when the water recedes, or it's going through a dry season. You've got to be able to identify these things. What makes a wetland? Just heard me go through this. Sufficient hydrology at or near the surface for approximately, in this georegion specifically, because it's based off the growing season, is about 14 consecutive days. Not 3 days here, 6 days, a month and a half from now, a few more, a couple of months, 14 consecutive days at or near the surface. If any of you go four-wheeling, you know the areas I'm talking about, because those are the ones where you want to throw the mud the best. All right, that's the hydrology. You gotta have that hydrology. Hydrophytic vegetation. In this job, you have to be able to identify plants. Not only do we look at soils and hydrology, we gotta look at plants. Every plant in the state of Texas, every plant in the United States has what's called an indicator status. And what that indicator status is, there's 5 categories. There's upland, facultative upland, facultative wetland, and obligate. And what that means is the upland means 99% of the time you're going to find this plant in an upland area. Facultative up means 66 to 99% of the time you're going to find it in an upland. Facultative, 33 to 66% of the time you're going to find it in a wetland area. Facultative wet, you know, we're talking 33 to 66% of the time found in a wet area. Obligate means 99% of the time you're going to find it in wetland. So we have to identify the dominant vegetation that's associated with it, not an occasional pop-up or something to that effect. So we have to go out and take a look at all the vegetation. So we're looking at the soils. Well, we're going to talk about soils in a second. We look at the vegetation, we look at the hydrology, we'll look at aerial photos, we look at the topography, we look at what's going on. And then we'll look at the soils, the hydric soils. What's important about looking at soils themselves is they give you a long-term indication of what's going on. When an area wets and dries, many people don't realize that there's iron in soil. And what happens when iron gets wet? It rusts. Well, if you take a look at your soils, most of your soils, there's a Munsell soil chart that we end up looking at. It has every color there is associated with the soils. And we'll look at it in conjunction and see if there's what they call depletions or masses. That's the oxidation. It's ferric iron changing to ferrous iron. And it tells us about the wetting and drying. And if it's there for a real long time, it depletes it completely out of there, the iron, and it becomes glade. It's almost gray. All right? So the soils give us a long-term indication of what's going on, and it'll also give us an idea of where this hydrology is. If it's 2 foot down, that's great. That's not where I'm looking for a wetland. There's important things to take a look at the whole suite of functions and how it plays in together. Okay? And this one, under normal circumstances. I cannot tell you how many times we commonly, in our world, we hear this term often. It's called NIMBY. It means not in my backyard. Folks get into spitting matches, and they want to get the neighbor in trouble. Or they bought this new area, and they built it, but they don't want anybody else to develop it. This is my old hunting grounds. By God, I don't want nobody taking over this area. I can't have them doing that. They're NIMBYs, not my backyard. So find everything they can to throw at, and we're part of that mud that gets thrown at the wall. So we'll go take a look. Is it under normal circumstances? And it's not uncommon. They'll send us pictures. And by God, if you were to take a look at that picture, the water's this deep. You know, people are having a heck of a time getting across. But they don't tell you when it was. So we have to take a look at the normal circumstances. Again, innocent till proven guilty. We've got to gather all the facts and make the call. Areas like this. Remember I was telling you, wetlands, you're going to find them interspersed. If I was to build a house, try to come in here and clear that out and land level it, and these wetlands in a jurisdictional landscape, I'd have to get a permit from the Corps of Engineers prior to doing so. And I guarantee you, most of you in this room have seen areas like this. And most of you didn't think much about it. And I can guarantee you, before I came to the Corps of Engineers, I would never thought the Army was going to be in my backyard taking a look at this. What happens normally is, the question is, how do I find out if there are wetlands in my property, or I'm getting ready to sell a piece of property, I'm getting ready to buy a piece of property, I'm wanting to do a hunt and lease, I'm wanting to, whatever it is you're getting ready to do, how do I find out if there's a wetland there? Or if there's any waters, not just wetlands, wetlands are one type of water, but any waters there that are subject to federal jurisdiction. The final say-so on jurisdiction is the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, unless it's overridden by the EPA. All right, I have to state in no uncertain terms, Environmental Protection Agency has the final say-so on jurisdictional determinations. All right, that being stated, they decided that they ain't got enough people and ain't got enough know-how, so they give it to the Corps of Engineers to take it. Unless they don't like what we're doing, and then they'll jump in and tell us what to do. Hey, it's, yeah, Mama said. So what happens is, if you bought a piece of property, getting ready to buy a piece of property, and you want a determination, and the determination says, are there any aquatic resources on this property that I got a piece of concern with the federal government, tell me what I can or can't do. They send us a letter with a map showing us the property. We'll come out and take a look, and we'll tell you. You have an official document from the Corps of Engineers written that comes back and says whether there are jurisdictional areas or are not. That's a determination. All right, it's a yes or no question, that's all it is. So if I got a big block, this whole big block here, and you ask me if there's a wetland there, and ask me if there's any jurisdictional waters on that, I'm gonna come out, or send some of my staff to come out and take a look. We'll get all the data, create our administrative record, send you a response back that says yes or no, there are or not. It's that simple, all right? But many times, that doesn't fully address the question. Determinations are a lot, no offense here, but a lot like pregnancy. Either you are or you're not. You can't be a little bit pregnant. So it's the same thing with determinations. Either you got aquatic resources there or you don't. It's not somewhere in between. But that doesn't really address your question. If I have a big acre, say I've got 40 acres here, and I want to build a house, say just up here, and all the wetlands and stuff are down here, what good did that determination do? It doesn't do you a bit of good. Unless you're trying to go for tax purposes and tell them, I got wetlands on my property, give me a tax break. That's where delineation comes in. A delineation is actual demarcation of that boundary. Where are those aquatic resources? How do I'm going to draw a line here. This side's wet, that side's not. So if I don't do anything as a wetland, great, it's on there. But I haven't put any fill in it. Uncle Sam ain't got a thing to say to me. Awesome. I know where it's at, and I know where to stay out of. Ideally, anytime you do a land development, you should know what they call environmental encumbrances, where your environmentally sensitive areas are. Wetlands being one type, rivers, creeks, tributaries, all know what those are, and avoid them to the utmost practical. Unless you want Uncle Sam in the middle of your business. And I'm not trying, don't get me wrong, I'm appreciative of my job. But I'm also appreciative of property rights. If you understand where the situations are, you understand what the law is, that accommodates what the law is supposed to do. Avoid, minimize. Our primary goal is looking after the chemical, physical, and biological integrity of the nation's waterway. If you don't know what's there, how can you do it? So doing educational outreach like what we're doing now is phenomenal. And again, I go back to applauding you. So, difference between a determination and delineation. You can send me a letter and ask for a determination. We'll be more than happy to do it. You send me a letter and ask me for a delineation, well, we might get around to it next time the icebergs start moving through Texas because I just don't have the resources. So what ends up happening, majority of times, not always, is they will employ an environmental consultant. And they'll go out and they'll gather all the data and the same stuff as what we would have to do, and they'll put it in delineation and flag it, show where these are, and then they'll submit that information to the Corps of Engineers for verification, because who has the final say? The Corps. And it's never official till you get that in writing. And I can't emphasize that enough. There's a lot of people out there with a lot of opinions that are not necessarily founded. All right, so it's really important to get that verification. And timeliness becomes an important issue too. Okay? All of these play into business decisions.
And the other thing, when he's talking about if, you know, say you had a 40-acre tract and all you wanted to do was build a house or a house in a barn, and so you think you have an area that's high or good, then you could say, okay, just give me a determination on this much and leave the rest of it alone. And that's something that we could do where you wouldn't have to get a delineation. But if we came back and there was a wetland within that area, you know, the small area, then you might have to get a delineation then.
See, and then again, the intent and purpose is looking after the chemical, physical, biological integrity of the nation's waterway. Many times we don't understand that. This is all the intent and purpose is. Expectations, when we get that, when you ask for a jurisdictional determination, we need a request from the property owner or authorization from their agent. I don't want to get, I've had guns pulled on me before. I don't want to get me or my staff shot. That's not a good way to start out a relationship. So I want a request from the property owners, so we can also respond back to them. And many folks are representing the property owners. Vicinity map. Where is this at? If you invite me to a party, and like John was just talking about, you invite me to a party, tell me how to get there, but only looking at this top part, not the whole thing, make sure you include that. Is it bounded by fences? Is there a fence on this side, telephone poles on this side, and we flag the other side? Fantastic. But we need to know where we're at. And the reason it is everyone in here knows what it's like to do the wetland hokey pokey. If I go, my left foot's in the middle of the puddle, my right foot's out. But that cotton pit and fence line, if I don't know where it's at, I may say that my left foot is on your property. And that gives you the wrong answer. So it's really important for us to know where that boundary is. Detail maps, just like I was talking about. Other supporting information. If you got other information that's already there, a consultant report's great. If you got your floodplain map, great. You got your Google Earth map, where some folks like to print stuff out. All of that's fantastic. The more information you give us, the easier you make my job, and the quicker we can respond to you.
Let me interrupt you here too. If you live in Hardin County and you need these maps, we have the technology to provide the maps for you at our office, and there's no charge. We'd be happy to.
Wetlands maps? Oh, you do have that
We do
now.
have-
No, not wetland map. We ain't going to that one
We have
yet.
the flood, well, he's gonna tell you about the wetlands, and we have some wetlands maps that aren't very accurate, I'm gonna say that again. But we also have flood zones, and we can also get your boundaries from the appraisal district and print all that out for you.
How do we get accurate wetlands maps here?
Got to go to the Corps. What they have a national wetland inventory map that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service put out. But what they did is they looked at high altitude aerial photo, and they looked at signatures on aerial photos, and they drew lines around them, and then they labeled them. There's no ground truthing. We've worked with these for 20 years, and we found them to be about 50% accurate.
And he's being
So-
very generous
So
to say
if you
50%.
rely on that, and there's not one on your property, and you go ahead and develop it, but there is a wetland there, that's not an excuse that, hey, I didn't know. So
You're not
it's a
going to find
tool.
one spot that's going to pick all the way.
There is no magic map where people email me a lot and say, hey, this is my property, do I have wetlands on it? I can't tell unless, we were on 3 properties this morning. I can't tell unless we go out there.
And on those properties this morning, one of them shows 100% wetland. And you want to know what I found?
Nothing.
Zero.
Well, what we're getting is our buyers are getting these scary letters from Esther's office saying that you have to sign off on this.
No, but what we give out is that if you feel, and it came specifically off of their website, if you feel that you may have wetlands on your property, then that's who you're supposed to contact, and you have it in your hand there.
And
We-
how many of
we
these
have
have you
you sign
passed
on.
out?
It's on the back of every permit we issue, and that's just their information. It doesn't say you have wetlands.
You're getting phone calls like this because all these letters are going out to all of our prospects coming
If you
in.
read that, it's off of their website, and it's their contact people in Hardin County have been impacted recently. We think they need to know what could happen, and that's what we tell them, because we've had a situation here, and fortunately, I think Kenny can tell you that everything has worked out well on that, and that the people knew nothing about it. And so that's to let them know who to call if they think they have a problem. It doesn't say they have wetlands. But some people will come in and ask about a certain site that they may own 40 acres across town that they're thinking about developing later on. So they need to have that 40 acres looked at also.
It's just scary to buyers. I'm a real estate broker.
It is scary.
It's scary to buyers, and if we had accurate maps, I understand why you cannot do that, but you're probably getting bombarded with phone calls, because these are.
No offense, but
No letters.
well, you've seen our project area, the area that we cover, and this is not the first time that there's been an awakening, for lack of better terms.
I got a question. When did this law take effect?
1972.
It's been around forever, yeah.
We're just learning about it.
That's why we're here today, because no one knew anything about it. That it doesn't have to be in a flood zone to be a wetlands.
I looked on Google Maps, and they've got this area down, I don't know who put that on there about where the wetlands are and so forth. Two questions about that. Number one, how accurate is it? And number two is, why don't the colors match? What's on the map itself and what's on the side, the colors don't match.
I'd be telling you stories like
I think you're talking about the NWI map.
National Wetland Inventory map.
Yeah,
That's
if
wrong.
it's
You went on Google Earth.
yeah, and you can get,
And
there's
you
a
get
layer.
down smaller, then it pops up your map.
And does it have like a PEM or PFO or something in the green? Does it have green polygons?
And there's also floodplain maps that you may be thinking, special flood hazard areas.
I'm just saying that I narrowed in, it showed the different colors, and they don't match the colors on the side. And I assume that where the brown area is what is wetlands and so forth.
Those are special flood hazard maps. Those are different maps totally. And, the brown colored or goldish colored area is a 500-year flood zone. The blue is a 100-year flood zone.
So what is PEM?
So is there any way to go online and see these maps? Any kind of
Our
accurate
National
map?
Wetland Inventory map, you can get a KMZ file to download on Google Earth, and it'll pull them up.
I'm sorry, what is that
KMG
file?
file,
KMZ.
KMZ.
K is in
Kelly.
Yeah.
Kelly.
Software.
Kelly, Michael, Zebra.
And if you search on the internet under U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service National Wetland Inventory maps, you can probably get a link to it to where you can.
And that's the exact map that John had, again, I'm reiterating. They're great if you're shooting scud missiles, but they miss as many times as they hit. And I can't emphasize that enough. It does, and even the definition of wetland, of what they did when they developed those maps, again, it was put out by Fish and Wildlife Service. It's not the same definition as what is used in federal regulation for what wetland is.
When was that map done?
When was it? They vary.
I mean, because, you're looking at it, when was it last updated with all that stuff that they have on it?
It varies, and the reason I state that is when you talk to the folks who end up doing those maps, it was done off of an aerial photo that was done. Many of the areas up in Liberty, 79, some were done in 82, some were done on 85. It depends on the aerial photo on which they took it. And it also may be an abnormally wet. All right, so it's given a false positive tonal pattern that they haven't ground truthed, but they're used, being a wildlife biologist, these are wonderful tools for us to use for ecosystem mapping. All right, if I'm looking at doing deer management, it's a wonderful tool for that. Is it giving the precise information of what I need for doing a house development? The answer is no. It's giving me tonal patterns for ecosystems. And that's what, again, Fish and Wildlife is the primary, the birds and bunny folks, that's what they need for their tool. But that tool has been transposed into people trying to use it for other things.
Okay, look, I just bought 10.03 acres in Sour Lake, okay?
Okay.
And I'm gonna build a home,
Okay?
okay? It's a Zone X, which even in '94, it did not flood on my property. But you can look to the right, left, forward, and back, and when it rains, it looks like an island, okay? So, am I excluded from that, or because there's floodplains around me? Matter of fact, the land to my left, which is, what is that? Dollar Land. Yeah, it's, they're having a hard time selling it because it does flood. But mine is like one of the highest parts. So my question is, my land wasn't affected in the worst flood in recorded history here. But am I gonna have to wait on y'all to tell me that I can build when we wanna build ASAP because around me floods?
No,
Well, but
What I'm-
you
what I'm-
said
let me
it
finish
could
what
be
I'm
right
saying.
here and then right here and,
what I'm saying is no.
delineation.
Everybody has the opportunity to make a business decision. All right? That business decision takes you onus and liability on your own. If you want something from the federal government that absolves you from that, then yes, you'll have to get something from me. If you want to do it on your own and your shirt's high and dry, fantastic. But you take all that onus and responsibility for that business
Well, if
decision.
it's never flooded, and is in, and even the worst flood, wouldn't logic and reasoning
not
say
disagreeing.
that but could y'all come and say, well, because there's a spot right there that's not on your property, you can't build?
No,
And
sir.
that means that everybody is going to have permission, no matter what, to do anything.
No, sir. Again, section 404 of the Clean Water Act says to discharge of dredged fill material into a water of the US. If you're filling, you just got through telling me it's all high and dry. If it's,
Yeah, I don't even need flood insurance, which is rare off 105.
I'm not gonna everything you told me indicates to me pretty quick that it don't sound like there's any wetlands or any waters that I got to be concerned with.
But there's that clause that we take it on our backs, that someone could come and say, later on, when I've got a 4,700 square foot home built, that I'm violating and have to undo that.
And this is why I go back to saying earlier about you're innocent till proven guilty. We, in the past 2 decades, we go through and gather the facts. We go through and see if there's any
Yeah,
substantiation.
And I believe that y'all would be fair, you seem like a nice guy, but that puts any building, any buying, anything, when it comes down to it, in bondage. I mean, the ultimate line, I mean, we could think, do all this, but until we send to you, or to the EPA, or to whomever is concerned, until we get a letter, even if we live on Mount Everest in Hardin County, we are not impervious to something happening.
Even if, I'll be candid with you, I send you a letter. Does that absolve you from anything else that's gonna go on? If, I send you the letter and say there's no wetlands there, but Esther gets upset and says it's in the floodplain, I can only address what the Corps of Engineers has say-so about. If it turns out that EPA says that there's a Superfund site under that, that's why that thing's built up so high. It's full of toxic waste down below. I can't address it.
No, I got you, and I'm not worried about toxic waste, but it just really means that everything has to be signed off on to make it completely legal.
For assurances, no, it can be completely legal without doing it, but if what you're wanting to do is do your assurances and wise investment in the future, that's what we're trying to do, is just give you the opportunity and give you the information. It's still a business decision, it's still gonna turn up to you, and it's all your power.
So what about, I kinda consider him in a fortunate position because he has not built. What about people who have built and were
Yeah.
clueless?
I understand, and we'll come out and will, if there's a whole lot of, in the majority of the violations that I've had in the 20-plus years of doing this, most of them are because people didn't realize there was anything. Didn't realize they needed a permit, didn't realize that they violated the law. Mea culpa, I did something, I stepped in the brown stuff and it's on my shoe. How do I get this stuff off? And unfortunately, John and I become really good about scraping stuff off people's shoes. But we end up taking a look and find out, what do we need to do to rectify the situation? And this is where we come in. Are there after the fact permits? Yes. Are there, we have to take a look at this, so what, is this a recalcitrant individual who specifically knew ahead of time? I mean, I've got judges in here who have the opportunity to deal with situations. And everybody here knows somebody who's done something like this, where they end up saying they're stupid as a fox, and they keep doing the same thing over and over and over again. Well, we build all of that in when we take a look at stuff. You're innocent till proven guilty. We're gonna work with folks to try to resolve it in the most amicable situation. If I turn around and somebody turns in and really turns into a horse's patoot, and we work with the Department of Justice, and we have to go to federal court, that's a whole nother story.
So I can assure you that every homeowner in here isn't like a fox when they build, thinking that they built to destroy whatever's in these holes with water.
Well, as far as people that have already built a house, we don't have the staff or resources to do surveillance. Like Kenny was saying before, if your neighbor calls, then we have a duty, we have to investigate, but if we don't get a call, we
There are a lot
don't
of
care.
violations that are going on.
How
Yeah.
far back can you go to look at somebody who may have violated it?
No.
Is it 5 years or is it more than 5
Statute
years?
of
The
limitations?
typical statute of limitations is 5 years.
Are there orders, I mean, like injunctive relief is more than 5 years, or is it your position you can go back more than 5 years for injunctive
We,
relief? Or
we can go back further than 5 years if there's substantial environmental warrants us to do that. Example, 7 years ago, somebody came in and asked for a determination. We told them that they're wetlands there, and they basically said, and went ahead and did it. There's substantial reasons, and we have to go to the Department of Justice, and Department of Justice has to give us that. But our typical is 5-year window.
And
In that scenario that you just gave,
Mhm.
what's the ultimate consequence for that? Someone knew they weren't supposed to do it and they did it anyway. and
Worst
they
case
went to the Department of Justice, what happens then?
Worst case scenario, and here's where everybody gets up crazy. Worst case scenario, for violations of section 404 of the Clean Water Act, there is a criminal provision. It can be up to a year in prison and $32,500 a day in fines for every day that it's been in there.
Now, Kenny, how many times have you seen that happen?
0.
In 25 years. Now, there have been cases in Florida, this guy got thrown in jail, but I think he was a jerk, and he kept saying, forget you, I'm gonna do what I want.
But
And
see,
eventually he ended up in jail.
and he also told the judge some things that you don't normally tell judges. I mean, use some graphic metaphors and things to that effect. But those are self-inflicted wounds.
How many reversals have you had where they had to restore what was there before?
Talking about moving a building, or are you talking
Just
about
reversal,
removing the?
period.
We had information from one of your staff that there was a pond that was dug on some property out in West Texas in the Austin area, and they were fined $7,500 a day until they filled it in and reseeded it. Is that true?
I have no clue. That's
You
not
know,
our
we're talking
area,
about
I
looking at
don't
that case,
know.
I never saw that case.
But to answer your question, say somebody comes in and they don't know that they filled a wetland, or they didn't know what the program was, and so they filled it in. What we try to do first of all is say, hey, can you just get this, just take it out and apply for a permit, okay? You take it out, then you're finished with me and Kenny.
The violation's gone.
Unless it's a forested wetland, and that gets a little more complicated, but if it's a herbaceous wetland, take it out and apply for a permit. We can let you leave it in and apply for a permit, but then you go to a public notice with all the resource agencies, they're gonna be pretty upset that you did it beforehand, and might be more difficult than just restoring it and getting the permit.
How often does that happen?
How, maybe 10 a year?
What, 10 a year?
Yeah.
And thousands and thousands of dollars?
For what, removing it?
Yeah,
Most of it's just whatever it costs to rent the bulldozer with the operator.
thousands and thousands of dollars.
Hey, the building costs, hey, what if, you have 40 acres and it's, y'all determine, okay, we got 10 acres over here in the corner, we're gonna delineate that. I heard the word, so to leave alone, but let's say you've owned that property forever, so you figure out, well, there's 10 acres there that's in the wetlands. What does that mean, leave alone? Like, can you not even walk on it? Can you not go? You just can't build or
Okay,
dig?
discharge fill material.
And on a deer lease, what if in the middle of your deer lease, you got 10,000 acres and 10 acres of it's wet? I mean, that's where deer
That's all right.
gravitate to.
If you're
I
not
mean,
filling it in, we ain't got a dog in the
So
hunt.
you can hunt
you
all
mow
that.
Can you build a fence through it?
Yes.
Okay.
No permit for
That's
fence.
the question.
Can you mow it?
Yeah.
Yes.
Can you mow it? I mean, that's,
Yes.
the debris would be like fill to me, that would be your
No,
wood.
wood chips are actually the type of fill because it takes time for, it actually changes the bottom elevation. Mowing itself is biodegradable.
Okay, this question concerning his 10 acres that he has, he's getting ready to put in his driveway. You said there's 4 waterways that are affected, you know, Pine Island Bayou, Village Creek, but
There's a
he
navigable.
goes to put in his driveway and he digs his ditches out, that fill migrates to one, is he in violation of?
Now,
It's a point source discharge, which means it has to come from a truck, shovel, backhoe, machine, directly into it.
as
If
far
it-
as
if you-
404 of the Clean Water Act, it has to be a point source discharge.
So
If you have a
it
pipe-
migrates 4 miles down to Pine Island Bayou, he's not in violation?
Not the 404, you are correct.
They might be a TCEQ issue with the
Texas Commission of Environmental
four
Quality.
oh two of the Clean Water Act, but it's not us.
You've had a question 3 or 4 times and haven't been able to call on you.
Yeah, I have a question. I realize that it's confidential to report these type of things to
It doesn't
you.
have to be.
And, most people are anonymous when they do it. However, I would like to know if you find out that this is a disgruntled person and they are just doing it to be ugly or vicious or retaliate against someone, is there something that can be done to this person? If it's a bogus claim, is there any legal
I wish.
ramifications?
It might be, I mean, the person that reported it might be able to sue them, but we don't have any legal.
Is there any jurisdiction about when it was handled wetland? Because a lot of areas that I've seen on the map you're talking about are areas that are actually impounded by the road or some other obstruction that was not there naturally.
That's a good question. Remember when I said under normal conditions? That's the important part. It's because it takes time for soils to become hydric. They don't happen overnight. When we start seeing all this, and usually, typically, you know, it depends on a lot, and I can get into a lot of variables and start looking at, you know, it depends on the pH of the soil, what the growing season. It usually takes about 3 to 5 years for it to change over. That's why when we do mitigation, and we'll talk about that when it comes to permitting, we usually have 3 to 5 year monitoring to make sure it's assured and it's reestablished. But I can tell you unequivocally, I've been to areas that got firsthand cattails growing in the middle of it, standing in water up to here. Wasn't a wetland. And the reason wasn't is because it was something that somebody recently dammed up. Under normal circumstances, it wasn't there.
All right, well, what is reasonable? Because some of these places are roads, because this whole county, especially the south half of the county, is so flat that, I mean, there's gonna be a puddle within an acre somewhere unless you dig a ditch to
Well-
drain.
Well, the puddle situation itself is, again, you're looking at, I go out and take a look at the puddle itself. Is it gonna puddle at least for 2.5 weeks, 2 weeks consecutively?
But it's the soils.
And now that's where you're getting at. And then we take a look at, not all wetlands are jurisdictional. Some wetlands may be way the heck up. We'll take your, I'm gonna pick on you here for a second, but this big property he's talking about. And I got a low spot right in the middle because Junior decided to go out and do some 4-wheeling and cut some donuts here, and it ponds up right now. And by God, it's been there for enough time, and the ducks are laying in there occasionally, and I've got cattails growing, and it's wet, and the soils are smelly, it's hydrogen sulfate, so it's got all the criteria. It may not be jurisdictional because it's not found in a jurisdictional landscape position. I could sit here and bore you to death and tell you about jurisdiction, how it does this and how it does that. And then you're gonna walk away and you're gonna try to apply it to yourself. No offense. I have enough problems trying to make sure that it's consistent. Turn it over to the people that need to make that call and where the legal responsibility is. I don't go see a psychiatrist for brain surgery. Put the onus where it needs to be. And granted, will it take time? Yeah. But if I've got a concern about it, I want to make sure it's done and done right.
One more thing, does it cost you, if, all right, say I'm fixing to do a project and I've got a puddle out there, I'm afraid I can't build on. Does it cost me to have somebody come out and look at it?
No, sir. It's your tax dollars at work.
Not from the Corps, but if you hire a.
If you hire an environmental consultant to do it, yeah. But the Corps of Engineers, you send me a letter with all of this stuff. Like, one thing I do want to point out right here, with this wonderful world of age and technology, we need a letter, written letter, with an original signature, not an email.
Do you come out within a couple of days and do it?
Now, how big was that area and how many folks go home? Yeah.
I have 2 questions. As far as acronyms, what is PEM 1A.
Colostrum emergent wetland one is,
Don't get me telling these stories now.
it's either,
This is-
it's the flooding frequency and how it's formed, I think.
The National Wetland Inventory maps are based off of something called the coordinate system, and it has to do with the hydrologic modifications and water regimes.
And my second question is, if we want to get this handled expeditiously, no offense to you guys, there's only 7 people, who are some firms that we can contact?
On our website, there's a list of all the environmental consultants. We do not recommend anyone because,
Right, you're the government.
We cannot.
that's right, you got that so well.
They used to
But you
be
can
there.
take a look at them, and some of the key questions you should ask. There's a lot of people who are entrepreneurs, who want to, you might ask them some key questions like, what manual do you use? I showed you just a second ago what manuals you use. How often are you submitting those? How many have you had verified? Because there's a lot of people who have no clue, and they're quick to,
Make you think they
Take
do.
your money.
What about logging in wetlands?
okay?
Can you do it?
That's a good one.
It's, boy, I'm gonna really get bureaucratic here. Can you, if it's part of an established ongoing silviculture activity, the answer is yes. If it's not part of an established ongoing silviculture activity, for example, some people like to go out and pull dead heads, or they go out and try to pull the old cypress swamps, the old cypress knees out of the section 10 waters, because they're dredging with that. The answer is, can they do it? Potentially, but they gotta get a permit to do it.
But just cutting timber, it's in a,
If I'm going in to cut timber,
but
there's no fill. If there's no fill, and there's, again, first of all, is there an aquatic resource? Is it jurisdictional? And is there a discharge of fill with it? There's an exemption for established ongoing silviculture activities. A lot of Hardin County is old pine plantation, and they're in rotation. Do they wanna come? I would recommend, because there's so much time that people end up calling me on a routine basis. I'm getting ready to go out and do it. This area's been in my grandpa's family's yard, and we're on a 50-year rotation. We've got loblollies. We're doing a slash cut in this area, selective harvest in this area. We're gonna bring skidders in. I've talked to a major timber company, I won't mention names, and they wanna come in and do it. Core, we believe it's exempt. Okay, send me a letter. I'll review it, send it back, say, all right, based on what you're telling me, sounds like it's exempt, get after it. And the reason I'm stating that is because otherwise what happens, and it's more and more people squeeze up to Hardin County, I'm not gonna lie about it. I talked to some folks earlier, it's kinda like there's a toothbrush and toothpaste and everybody's squeezing and going north. So your population's gonna increase. And with your population increase, you're gonna get a lot more NIMBYs. And a lot more NIMBYs mean a lot more phone calls for me. I'd just soon be, remember how I started this about being proactive instead of reactive? I would just soon be able to have a letter on my desk saying, we've already looked at that, so when they call up, and it, don't get me wrong, it makes people as mad as a wet cat to say, we already know about that, thank you very much, and they've already been authorized, have a nice day, but thank you for your call. It saves us a lot of time and effort, because otherwise we're still, like John said, we've got to go investigate it. We're gonna have, because we're civil servants, we due diligence, we need to go find out what's going on. Will we end up with the same result? Probably, but it's gonna take a lot of time in between, and there'll be other people starting to jump in on it.
So if you wanted to clear it and make pasture, you got to get a determination on the property, right?
If, you might get in trouble with NRCS there too for swamp busting, if you're going into a clear pasture area like that.
What if it's not swamp, it's just woods?
Well, that's, the National Resource Conservation Service is the NRCS. The old soil survey that the farmers work with them a lot. But they have a provision, not like the Corps, they're an independent federal agency, that if you take an area and you convert it over, like a forested area, old forested area, and change it over to pasture, you could potentially, I'm not NRCS, so I can't speak for them, could be potentially in trouble for swamp busting. I'd talk to NRCS about that, if you're changing type from one to another.
But if it's upland, then
Yeah, they
you,
won't care.
you can convert it, it don't matter. If it's upland, you can just do it.
Yeah.
So if you got a determination from us and it said it's upland, you're free to go.
One other question in the practicality portion of this. I know you can't refer because you are the government, and I get it, because I used to be the government, I just retired.
Congratulations.
Yes, amen. Bottom line, is there any way that we as a community can know who has been submitted the most referrals, or who had, you know, could y'all put like gold stars or checks or number of referrals or number of referrals approved? Because if we're gonna take this, you know, financially, we want someone that's credible. So is there, I mean, I know you have a ton of lists, but is there any way that we can determine who's been doing it the longest and who's had the most referrals? Probably not, thank you, I know, it's from the government.
I wish we could, pardon me?
Or who's been overturned, let's say, for example, someone says that there are.
They probably can't say that either.
I can't say how many of them have been returned, but the vast majority of consultant reports that I've seen have missed areas, have not been done correctly.
Have missed areas?
Yes, ma'am.
So
Are
then
you also
it's best to
seeing
wait.
areas that they included that weren't actually wetlands?
Yes, ma'am.
What's the ratio? Is it about the same, is they miss as many as they find?
No, most of them, no offense, but most of them are gonna look more, they're gonna try to err more on the side of the landowner,
Sure.
because they're, no offense, they want.
Exactly
Skippy.
right. Exactly.
And that's really what they're gonna look at. And that's why I was saying it's so important to get it verified by the Corps, because once it's verified, the big question, the elephant in the room nobody's asked, it's good for 5 years, unless information warrants revision. Going back to what you're talking about earlier, about how long does it take to do stuff? Our verifications, when we send you a letter, it's good for 5 years, unless something really substantial alters in that area. So, you got 5 years to work out. And guess what? If you're coming up on 5 years from there and you're thinking, man, we didn't get the chance to do it, the economy went south, and I'd still, my kids are thinking about it, they're about to get out of college, and we want them to develop property. Ask for an extension. Great, no big deal, we've already done the groundwork. Awesome, we take a look. Many times what we can do with that is we'll look at off-site information. We may not have to conduct another site visit. Get you another one, you're good for another 5 years. But don't, too many times we make presumptions. And when you start presuming, you also make assumptions, and everybody knows what assumptions do.
I have a question. I think, I'm looking at some of the faces that are in here, and one of them just had to leave, but, could you kind of touch on the liability of, like, you know, like, I know we have some county guys here from, the foremen on some of the crews. Like, if they go out into a wetlands area and they dig a ditch and they put the dirt on the side there, what I'm trying to say is what is who is liable? We have realtors here, if they sell property, I know they were concerned about would they be liable since they sold the property? Kind of touch on that of, who has the responsibility of making sure that this is, and another thing too, the county is not responsible to even tell you about this, and I do not withhold permits. If you wanna build, I'll issue you a permit, and the rest of it's between you and the other folks, unless it's in a flood zone.
And then, I ain't gonna tell you what to do in a flood zone, you have to go talk to Esther, I ain't taking
That's
advice on her. As far as liability goes, what we end up doing and what we work with the Department of Justice, liable parties are the property owner and the persons that are associated with doing the activity. If I hire you to run the dump truck and you're dumping on her property, you're both gonna be held liable. And the reason that is because I cannot have, if we have to decide to do restoration, and the colonel orders restoration, which he can't do, and he orders him to restore it, he can't order him to restore something on her property. So all parties are liable. Now, if we go in front of a judge, the judge has the ultimate wisdom. I ain't never been as smart as a judge, so I turn it all over to them and they decide, and they'll call it out. But the liable parties that are identified in it are those. Did that answer your question? Yes, sir.
Myself and most likely most of the people in here that has purchased property
Yes, sir.
did not have a clue about wetlands. We done title searches, we done everything, and there's not a clue in there about wetlands. The only way I found out about it was the permit office. It needs us. We need to know as a homeowner and land purchaser. We didn't know,
Yes, sir.
and now we're home.
I don't know if you hung or not. Because just, remember what we said, just because there's a wetland on a property, and if it's jurisdictional, hear how we keep building these if, then, but go through, if there is, and you bought the property, and it says, Does it mean you can't get a permit to do it? The answer is no.
I understand.
I think what he's trying to say is, as a real estate broker, when we're selling property, the most common question we'll have is when we're selling land, is it in a flood zone? That is the first thing they ask us. Well, then, you know, it's classified in an X zone, in an A, and, you know, it goes on. And most of the time, when you hear it's in a flood zone X, most people assume that it doesn't flood. And this was just recently brought to my attention. I've been in this business for 18 years, and I have been shocked at this whole deal. I'm just surprised. I'm from this area. Southeast Texas is my home. And when we see puddles, you know, I don't think anything about it. It just drains and goes away. I think of wetlands as the beach, or, you know, out in Winnie and Finette, when you see grass and water, you know, and you're crabbing. That's what I consider wetlands. But he's right. You know, there's a lot of homeowners that are clueless, and I feel bad for these people.
And so do
because-
we, and that's why we're out here trying to do the outreach. I'll tell you point blank. When I first came to work for the Corps of Engineers, I did not understand why the Army's in my backyard. My father, he's still alive, but my father and I had some nice heated discussions on this. And he told me where to go and how to get there, and he wouldn't shy about it. But after we discussed it and explained what it is, this is not a preservation program. It's not to stop development. What it is to look after, remember I said the chemical, physical, biological integrity of the waterway. This program has been around. Just because folks don't know about it, there's a lot of stuff that's going on that I don't know about. I'll be very candid with you. That's part of the reason John and I, when Esther talked about it, and we could get a captive audience, I don't like to speak in front of a lot of folks. But I want to share with you what's there to make sure that you don't step into something. And I appreciate your concerns. I honestly do. But I'm hoping that you guys will help spread the word so we can be proactionary instead of reactionary.
And that's what we're trying to do on the back of our permits, to spread the word, to call you two and find out what they need to know.
But I want to retire.
And we appreciate you very much.
But has there been, I mean, I don't think anybody back here, I mean, we've heard of wetlands restoration and protection for years. But I think everybody, just like she said, if you think about the marsh, or everybody knew the edge of the bayou and all that stuff. But has there been an expansion of what they considered wetlands down here? All of a sudden, the area that's a puddle, that, you know, we all knew, well, we really need to put some dirt over there, or put a ditch, but it's not a good place to go. All of a sudden, that became the government's jurisdiction instead of the stream down the county.
All right, now you, go ahead.
Well, first, I investigate a lot of unauthorized activities, and I'd say at least half of them didn't have a clue. So we're not gonna go, okay, you owe $7,000 a day, let's go. What we first try to do is say, hey, can you restore it? If you restore it and get a permit, then we're good. Can you avoid it? And if they can't restore it and they wanna get a permit, then we'll let them go through an after-the-fact permit process. If they get a permit, fine. If they don't get a permit, then it comes back to us and we have to deal with them again. But, I mean, so a lot of people are unaware, unfortunately.
Okay, is it the NIMBYs that have caused this, like,
Well,
all of a sudden, now we're coming and be aware, or is it our, executive branch? I mean, is it, where does it stem from?
Well, okay,
Is it the
back
neighbor
to
or
your
the
point,
resident?
we had jurisdiction over every wetland, no matter where it was located, until 2000, when the Solid Waste Agency of Northern Cook County, which is in Chicago, they sued the Corps of Engineers and went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said, no, not all wetlands are jurisdictional. So that brought it back. And then we had another court case, Rapanos and Carabel, in 2006 or 2007, so we got new guidance in 2008, and I know a lot of y'all are familiar with the floodplain, if it's in the floodplain or not. Well, that was what we were going on a lot, but now that got changed. We just got the new rule on August 28th, so our jurisdiction's changed again. And
Which expands your jurisdiction, or? That's a yes.
based on, he's gonna kill me. Based on the Rapanos and what I've seen, it may bring in some more.
So who
I
can
just
we
like being a little
ask
bit
if
pregnant
we don't
again.
get-
Y'all bound to know what that
Seriously.
says. Where do you what came down August the 28th.
Yeah, well, I've done some JDs that were right before that, and looking at them, under the new rule, they would have been jurisdictional where they weren't before.
Okay, so it's more strict than what.
Appears
In
to
some
be.
previous enforcement cases we investigated.
So who do we need to send letters to tell them that you guys need more people?
help.
Well,
I think they
that's
pretty much have figured that out in Galveston County by now, cause they pretty much live in
Yeah,
Hardin
but I wanna
County.
know who the big dog is.
The
Let's
big
talk
dogs,
about-
the big
yeah.
dogs, in all honesty, is your congressmen, they're the ones that set our budget and our salaries.
So everybody send letters to your congressman.
Well, if we're still in business, the government's getting ready to shut down at the end of the week, so who knows what's going on.
So if you're getting ready to build a house, you can purchase.
Wait till this next Tuesday.
Do it, shut up, get out.
Yeah, really, I know a guy that pulled his lawn.
I've got a question. You know, I've been involved in land development for decades, okay? Galveston County, we all know about it. Sabine County, you have Toledo Bend, you know, waterways. Wetlands have been around for generations. And, you know, it's due diligence to the landowner, the developer, and the real estate agent to know about it. I mean, Texas Real Estate Commission has a form for this. It was put out
That's right.
in December of 2011. I mean, you know, we've been aware of this, but how can we get, I know you're saying that we cannot get an accurate map because there may be 4 feet of wetlands or whatever, but we're trying to keep you guys from being so busy, okay? How can we do this?
You
How
know,
can we help you?
And we're trying to keep our clients from panicking.
I'm not disagreeing with any of that, and here's where the real challenge comes in, and I don't know exactly how to answer your question, because they are scattered, they are all over everywhere, and I cannot tell you definitively that it is, because then I'd be lying. And Mama told me a long time ago, I'm too stupid to lie, so I'm just gonna tell you the truth. Without seeing the site-specific areas, you all know how Texas, there's many areas that are flat as a pancake, and then there's other areas where you start getting into the hills. And you get over here into the Chenier Plain, this Piney Woods, Flatwood area, you're gonna have some that are wet and some that ain't.
Yeah.
But,
Go ahead.
but I mean, there are consultants, but that's gonna cost, and it's not an official JD. So,
So when we have buyers who are looking at land, several hundred acres, okay, for example, and we have only usually an option period of 10 days, we can expand that, but I mean, we've got to, you know, how
Environmental encumbrances, and this is many times what we've seen in other counties, and I can't say that it is or it's not. What I've seen is work successfully in other areas. As I said before, I honestly believe a large part of what you're seeing in this area and increasing the environmental awareness is you're starting to see population growth. And it's squeezing up this way. And this is typically what's happened all over, is because of the population growth. And what we end up having to do is, that law has been there, but people are just now coming cognizant of it. So how do we address it? Many of the landowners in the other areas, before they identify all the environmental encumbrances, and that means something to a real estate person. I'm not a real estate person, don't claim to be, I don't have all the knowledge. But when they do it, they get the landowner to get a determination up front. That makes it more marketable for them. They get a delineation done, it makes it more marketable for them. So they know that, and I don't wanna say it's developable land, but that's a wonderful term that people use very innocuously.
Yeah, do their due diligence.
Well, they do that and they figure out where it's at. Then they have something to go forward with. But many times because I just gotta get out of here, gotta get going while the getting's good. So it's up front, again, proactive instead of reactive.
Switching to some of this proactive stuff, what sort of plants do you generally find in a wetlands area? I understand if you have palmettos, you got problems.
it's funny, we're just on 3 sites this morning that have palmettos and not a wetland on it. But they can grow in wetlands, but that's not indicative, but we hear that a lot, especially from the resource agencies. Oh, there's palmettos out there, that's a wetland, go bust them. We go out there, it may or may not be a wetland.
What other ones?
Green ash is typical, cattail, you got,
Spike rushes,
Spike
beak rushes, umbrella sedges.
Kenny, what about our political subdivisions, or our road and bridge departments and our drainage districts, are they gonna have to?
They're held to the same accountability. The county,
JDs before they do any work, and how long will it take?
We just had to do, when we've replaced
I had to go to
Park Road.
Galveston and get a permit to do work. So, yes, we are. We're bound by the same rules.
But we're like y'all, we're just finding all this out.
So will this take like months to get our ditches cleaned out and our road ditches cleaned out?
Probably, I ain't gonna lie to you. I'm not gonna, because they're gonna have to go through much of the same situation
Yep.
as what you are.
Well, you don't always have to come in for a determination, but could be a consequence or not. But if you think, if you think something's suspicious, certainly talk to us if you know.
I'm in the middle of purchasing a rather large tract of land, and the contract hadn't gone through or anything, so I need to get the current landowner to contact y'all about whether or not there's wetlands. That would be the thing to do.
If I were buying the property, I'd make sure that I have my ducks in a row on it.
If he's under
I
contract,
would hate to be a real estate agent in Hardin County, now I can tell you that.
Well, it's not just Hardin County, that's the important thing.
Or anywhere.
It's all over the United States that this is applied, and it has been for a long time.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Rhonda, isn't there a paper that says that you have the right, if you're entering a contract, you have the right to get this determination? Don't y'all have
Yes,
that?
it's in the contract, I think it's on page 4 of the contract, and there's a portion in there that talks about toxic substances, wetlands. If you as a buyer wish to have an assessment done, there's an addendum that we can attach to the contract. Of course, you have to check if you're gonna have it done, and then you have so many days you have to put in the blank. And I don't know how many days that's gonna take, but, it is in there, and it's been brought to my attention several times, and I have done it on several properties. Normally, if they're in a flood zone X, like we all around this area think, if you can't crab there or ride a boat there, then of course we probably wouldn't have done it, but, I have recently used that addendum many times. If I look at the property myself and I think that it might be a wetland, then, it's kind of common sense to me, I
How long did
guess.
it take you to get a determination?
I got mine in 4 weeks on my lot.
Did you go to the Corps for it, or did you get an independent?
I went to the Corps.
But he was already working in the area that she's talking about. They
Yes,
had
our
already,
area was one of the areas that got a complaint, and I sold there were 42 lots. I sold 22 just in August, and then, I just found out about this past summer that there was an investigation going on. So, yes, I'm very aware of all of it, so.
But if you're under contract, you can request it from us.
Okay.
But let me say something. This is something I learned as a commissioner, and I will tell y'all. And Kenny, and this was something Kenny kind of conveyed to me back when he and I were talking. Development, when you're developing properties and stuff, can cause wetlands. Where there was not wetlands before, suddenly wetlands develop. And so if the guy down the road has built property up and you're building here, and you're going 3 to 5 years later, you may have wetlands that weren't there 5 years before. Development does cause wetlands. So that's something to think about when you're going in, you've got 9 additions in an area built. And in the middle of those 9 additions, somebody decides, okay, we're gonna finally sell our land, we're gonna build this addition here in the middle of all that. I would definitely get that checked, because you don't know what's transpired over the years in that segment of land. It could have been the highest point at one point.
And I've seen a lot of retention ponds in these new subdivisions. That, I'm just like, why would they put that there, cause you got little kids buying houses that can fall off in the water. That is a man-made,
Feature.
yes. Is it jurisdictional, is it non-jurisdictional? I mean, we need to know these kind of things when we go to sell houses, so.
but if we don't have them, the property's gonna flood if we don't have, cause every time they pour a
You gotta
slab.
have some place for the water to run off, 'cause
Yeah.
Most of the time, detention basins are non-jurisdictional.
Retention.
I don't know how far you are into your presentation, I don't wanna hold you up, but I would like to hear some discussion on the watershed approach to wetlands determinations, and some discussion on ephemeral streams versus tributaries, and where an ephemeral stream becomes a tributary or not an ephemeral stream anymore, and some discussion on connectivity. Can you give us that going to be part of the presentation, or is it?
Yeah, we can address that. We came here specifically. I've got 40+ slides here. We can sit here and go through each one and do this. But more important to me is to respond to what you guys got questions and concerns about. And like I told you before, some of it may not be what you want to hear, but it's the truth. All right? Coming back to what you're saying, looking at the watershed approach. What the Corps of Engineers is trying to do, and it's been guided by the executive offices up above us, is to take a look at things from a watershed approach. And it's taking a look at the whole watershed area itself. And the quality, remember what I said, the chemical, physical, biological integrity of the nation's waterway. How does it affect it? So when we take a look at that, we need to take a look at what these are draining into, how these are affecting the water quality associated with it. The next part of your question, you're talking about tributaries. It's a wonderful $20 term for a 5-cent item. Oh God, what is a tributary? It's a conveyance, a hydrologic, normally it's hydrologic in this, at least for what we're talking about, a hydrologic conveyance. All right, can a tributary be man-made? The answer is yes. The difference between ephemeral, intermittent. Ephemeral means, by the technical definition, it flows only after a rain event. Short, brief, episodical, flashy events. You get a frog choker, it runs through. You got ephemeral drains. Are those waters the U.S.? No. Are they tributaries? No. Intermittent. Somebody's went through and they've dug the situation so it's going to serve as this drain again. But they've done deep enough that it's hitting the groundwater. All right, so the groundwater table associated with it. That's more intermittent because it's there for a longer period of time. Often what you will see is you'll get a drainage feature, and then you come on down a little bit further and it becomes ephemeral, then it becomes intermittent, and then it becomes perennial, which means 24/7. It's always got water there. That's
Such
just,
as Little Pine Island Bow.
pardon me?
Such as Little Pine Island Bow.
Right.
Example, I'm trying to come up with an example that
Well,
makes sense.
even Boggy Creek. I mean, we can look at a lot of the waterways around here. The waterways that are perennial, flowing 24/7. Those are waters of the United States. They're subject to federal jurisdiction under 404 of the Clean Water Act. John named off 4 of the navigable waters of the United States are subject to Section 10 also. A water that's subject to Section 10 is also subject to Section 404. Again, what we're trying to do is share with you. We spend weeks trying to educate folks on what's going on. You're drinking out of a fire hose right now. I'm trying to hit the highlights of what we can or cannot do and address for you.
So if they buy a lot and it has a drainage easement beside it that's 50 foot wide, and it comes a gully washer and the water's standing for like 5 days, but then it drains off, it's not a wetland.
Right.
Certainly, no ma'am.
How could we get the water worse in Sour Lake anyway? I mean, what could we do? I mean,
Be careful what you're asking for there.
what I'm saying is,
Don't say any names.
drilling the well, I gotta have, multiple filters, or it will kill the, my plants, palm trees that I'm gonna plant.
And that's just it, that's the intent of the whole program, the Federal Water Pollution Control Act, now called the Clean Water Act. The intent was trying to help clean things up, because people were not cognizant of it. And that's where we're at, because we're trying to increase environmental awareness.
So sir, what it sounds like is if I have a 400 acre farm or a 200 acre farm that I'm gonna probably keep, don't worry about it. I mean, I've got it fenced, I got my cows running in it. If I've got 1,000 acres that I bought to future divide, probably go ahead and get that.
Be wise.
Now, when I get that, naturally, I'm not gonna sell 1,000 acres in 5 years probably. It's gonna take me longer. Am I only good for 5 years?
Yes, sir. Until you come back in and you can ask for an extension.
Okay, so if you're a developer here, you probably should go ahead and get some letters coming to y'all
I would recommend it, yes, sir.
and get all of our land cleared up, so these ladies are not gonna have their issues
Yes, sir.
when we get ready to sell it.
That's right.
Yes, due diligence.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
That's the way it is.
But if I've got 400 acres, most likely you're not gonna come to me and say, hey, we wanna go on your place and see if you put a barn on a piece of wetlands. Without somebody complaining.
Right.
They're not surveilling. He said no surveillance.
We don't have the staff to do
You
surveillance.
don't, yeah, you're not coming out looking for problems.
I've got enough on my plate without going.
Kenny, let's take a little bit further. If he sells this land to be developed, because I asked you this specifically.
No.
And I buy an acre and I keep it for 20 years and everybody's built all around it. That doesn't mean because he had that determination done when he sold the land that my acre is still clear because
That
I've
is
waited
correct.
too long on it.
But now, if all my neighbors built around me and built up and turned my piece of property into wetland, do I have any recourse?
As far as the Corps of Engineers goes, no, but there's some, I'm not a lawyer, you have to turn to counsel on that.
Well, I don't wanna sue anybody, that piece
Well,
is
but
a
that's
junk.
where, but that's where it really turns into,
In
is because what
floodplain,
you end
it's
up looking
civil,
at,
it's a civil.
is it becomes
That's right, you
a,
can't, you could.
Texas Water Code has a,
They can't put
there's a
their water off
regulation
on it.
against it.
Texas water code,
But
you can't do it.
potentially, every house built in Hardin County is built on a slab, has got at least a foot and a half of dirt on it, it's been hauled in. So potentially, everybody is built in Hardin County in the last 5 years.
No, they floodplain.
I seriously doubt it because there's so much upland, you know, what we're doing is we're focusing a whole lot on this negative attribute of everything here is not wet. I've heard numerous discussions already about all the upland areas, so.
Yeah.
What about, pond digging? Is there, I heard not long ago that every pond you dig has to have to be permitted. It's not livestock pond, regardless of pond, any kind of pond digging.
If you're in a, if you believe you have a wetlands.
If you dig in a pond, and remember what 404, what we're talking about, the Corps of Engineers is involved with 404. If there's a discharge of dredged or fill material into it, if you dig in a pond, you're gonna do it with what, a backhoe?
Bulldozer.
If you do a bulldozer and it's in a wetland area, yeah, you're gonna trigger the need for a permit, because there's a discharge of fill. If I'm digging it with another piece of equipment that doesn't discharge fill material, I'm not telling people how to dig ponds, but if they're doing it with that and there's no discharge of fill, then I haven't got a dog in the hunt. The federal government
It's
hasn't
not
got
a
any.
wetland and it doesn't.
If it's in a
Right,
flood
you all
zone,
do pond permits for non-wetland.
if you dig in a flood zone, you have to have that permit anyhow, if you're digging in a
Now,
flood zone.
bear in mind, and I wanna make sure it's very clear. Remember what I said earlier about the difference between section 10 and section 404. And I'm presuming that you're talking about specifically digging some pond up somebody's property, not digging off one of these navigable waterways, because that's dredging, and that's a whole nother story.
Yeah, as far as digging a pond, if you excavate it without discharging fill material into a water United States, it doesn't require a permit. But where you put that material, if that's in the water
That's the
United
important
States, then that could be. So, but if
Well,
you're
make
on
sure
an
you know where
upland and
you're
you're just digging it and spreading the material around for a house pad or something, and it's all upland, then you're fine.
But existing bond.
Yeah, what about that? That's.
What if they wanted to make one larger, an existing pond?
You going out and you digging your existing pond. Okay, same situation. Filling in an existing pond may be another story, because now it's an aquatic resource. And with the new, Uncle Sam decided in August 28th, as John mentioned earlier, to expand or include some areas, aquatic resources that historically were not within our federal purview. So, we would have to take a look at that on a case-by-case basis. And what I mean by that, and I'm sounding like a bureaucrat, and I told you I would at points, because I'd have to see exactly what it is that we're saying. But then, you could get a letter that addresses that specifically and remove that ambiguity. Business decision. Yes, ma'am.
Just for clarification, federal regulations, y'all provided us with the two that are the most
Common.
popular or common. Having worked in the federal government, I know, and a lot of people don't, that you're governed by state law and federal law simultaneously. And say, for example, you got convicted on a drug case in the state, they can turn around and convict you in the federal level if they choose to. So there's two separate states of laws, or laws. Are there any state laws that y'all are familiar with that maybe we as a group are not aware of that we need to be checking on simultaneously to make sure that we don't do all this, 2 or 3 times?
Well, unfortunately, there's 2 or 3 different places that can issue permits. Texas Water Development Board, Fish and Wildlife, the Corps. It just depends on your property. It depends on what you have there. But yeah, there's several different, like
But as the
floodways.
general public, how would we know that?
But if, no, the state does not regulate any wetlands. Okay, there's about 5 states across the country that did take in, that they regulate even isolated waters in their own state. Texas is a big property rights state. Texas said, no, we're not gonna regulate our own waters, you don't have to get a permit from the state.
Are there any additional federal regulations or agencies that we need to be looking at dealing with?
Floodplain?
Floodplain?
Flood zones are federal, your permits for those are federal. Like I said, again, in Texas, the Texas Water Development Board can have a say on your land, and then the Texas Parks and Wildlife.
Texas Water and Development?
Water Development
Water,
Board.
yeah, water development board.
But those are all Texas areas, not federal, but your flood zones are federal.
Is there cases where flood and wetlands overlay each other?
Yes.
And who does have what happens?
If you have a flood zone and you come in, or even like a floodway, there's different types of flood zones, and you come in and want to develop in that, say a floodway, we got several of them. You want to get a permit, I'm going to require that you get your 404 before I can issue a permit in a flood zone, because that's your wetlands determination, and also like no rise certificates, so you can't develop if you don't get those permits in those areas.
So you have jurisdiction, and both y'all have jurisdiction, and, okay.
Homeowners associations get involved with this stuff too.
Yes.
What you end up finding is similar to what you're saying. If you're looking at the bureaucratic pyramid, the federal government has one layer. The state has another. Counties have another. Homeowners associations have another. And because we authorize something in one area does not preclude or authorize it for anybody else. The state, what you're talking about, a common one that went, I know you're, good thing you're sitting down because this may catch you in a shock. We try to reduce the bureaucracy for some areas, like our permit authorizations. When we do a 404 permit, we run it to a 401 authorization, which is the Texas Commission of Environmental Quality. It's a water quality issue. We run those simultaneously to reduce that bureaucracy. We are trying to work with that. We're trying to increase efficiencies.
I have one other question as a realtor. There is a lot of wetlands in Hardin County, and there are people that buy them actually for, hunting leases, duck hunting, whatever.
Yep.
Is there any credits or anywhere that you can go to get, aid from the government or any type of situations like that? Isn't there wetland credits or something? Or any resources that we can look at? To make it advantageous for them to buy in the wetlands?
Actually, there are numerous different things that they end up doing. When we got, I don't know if we'll ever get to it before everybody, when you go through a permitting scenario, we look at avoidance, minimization, and but last not least is mitigation. Mitigating areas often goes into mitigation banks, where people will buy areas and they'll develop, take these wetlands and they'll look at them and try to enhance them, to make them function better for water quality.
Right.
The wetland banker, it's an entrepreneur relationship where they buy a big area, it's got wetlands, they're gonna enhance it. They go through the procedures with an IRT, an interagency review team, get the bank blessed. And what I mean by that, it makes it marketable. And they determine what they're gonna sell the credits for out of that bank. So when she decides to fill in a wetland, the first thing that avoidance minimization, she has to fill in a wetland, she can't avoid it. She's gonna turn and see, is there a bank in that watershed that I can buy into to offset those environmental impacts?
I know there's a lot of banks in Galveston County and Louisiana, but do you have a lot of those?
There's some all through this area, there's some service area already.
And how do we find out about the banks? And just,
You go to our website again, there's a place called Rivets.
Uh-huh.
And it shows where the mitigation banks are, and it shows the service areas. But if somebody wants to be an entrepreneur and they want to establish a wetland mitigation bank, that's a potential way to do it. They can take a look at these things. There's a lot of different, wetlands themselves are not, they're not detrimental. It goes back to taking a look and being mindful of what it is and a wise utilization of the resource.
Some of the people that find out they have a lot of wetlands or a lot of streams on their property, they might go turn it into a bank and try to make money off of it.
Or they'll turn to Parks and Wildlife and try to sell it. Or WRAPs, RAP programs within RCS, Wetland Reserve. There's a lot of different things themselves because they understand that wetlands, somebody used a good analogy earlier in a discussion I had today and said, wetlands are the kidneys. They're filtering a lot of stuff that are going on. so they do serve some important functions, so there's that capability. So there is marketability associated with it. And I've been told in some areas, there's even tax breaks if you've got wetlands on your property. Don't know, don't speak, can't address that. I can only speak for the Corps.
Many years ago, under the Clean Water Act, the state of Texas and the Water Development Board agreed to do mapping of the watersheds. Are y'all familiar with that as far as our watershed from this?
They, a long time ago, they've revamped watershed maps numerous different times, and especially since the Corps of Engineers has decided to help with some flood protection barriers and saltwater intrusion areas, but the watersheds are very dynamic. But yes, there is in the Texas Water Development Board still is actively looking at those watershed mapping and watershed regimes.
On the part back on the tributaries, have you done enough work in Hardin County yet to tell us what streams, whether it be County Marsh Gully or Coleman's Gully or Clemens Gully or any of the other ravines, have you done enough work in Hardin County yet to have a map showing what you consider tributaries as opposed to the ephemeral streams? Or do we need to send you some more applications?
Even if I was to tell you that, they could change tomorrow, because tributaries themselves are very dynamic. The idea situation, if I were gonna do it, Kenny speaking, of all my years doing this, if I were gonna take a look at it, I get what's called a USGS quad map. And take a look. Right, a solid blue line means it's a perennial system. It means it's flowing 24/7. Tributary, there's a red line item, whoop, all right, we got a situation. If it's broken, gosh, broke. It's probably intermittent or ephemeral. And if you start looking at the quad maps, they do elevations. And they give you an idea of where your flow regime is. And if it's the surface water, the higher up you're gonna get, the less flow regime it's got. Now understand that a lot of the USGS maps were done in the 50s and 60s, so they may not be as reliable. But that's one of the first tools that we end up looking at when we go to offsite. NRCS puts out soil survey maps too that are also very helpful, and it tells you where the water is. Is it a dense montmorillonitic clay? Wow, $20 term. Is it the water running primarily off of it? Or is it a loamy material where you have a aquitard down below, where it's moving translateral down below it? Wow, that'll give you a good indication too. But no, to answer your question, no, we do not have a one-stop map that'll show you all the
For Hardin
tributaries.
County on tributaries?
Not anywhere do I have one.
Well, you were talking about the US Geological Topographical Maps.
Yes, ma'am.
If it is defined by a broken, let's say it was something more recent and up to date, is a good indicator, ones where the lines are broken up with the dots in between, like, for example, I have a couple of topographical maps. If it is a, line, dot, dot, line, dot, dot type
Intermittent system.
description of a water feature, whether it's a tributary or some sort of drainage, natural drainage device. If there are split up, if it's defined by lines and dots, that is intermittent or ephemeral, correct?
That's typically what it means, yes. But I would not bank solely on it. That's poor investment policy. Yes, sir.
For most real estate people, they're talking about developing the land to build a house on it.
Yes, sir.
You may have 40 acres.
Yes, sir.
Let's say on 5 acres, it's built plenty high, all good. If you had your jurisdictional determination just on that 5 acres where they're gonna build, is that all they would need?
Yep. 5-cent question, 5-cent answer.
Yes, sir.
I own some land out here, it's on the creek, and we cleared it like 50 years ago, down to the creek, and I run cows on it. And I got it mowed, I mow it maybe twice a year and run cows on it. Now, is there any, can I still do that? I mean, I know it's a floodplain area, I mean, it's on the creek. We
Yeah.
didn't, we own property on the other side of the creek too. We fenced up to the creek, we didn't go across it.
Yes, sir.
When we cleared, we didn't clear right up to the creek, we stayed back a little bit. But I can still maintain that as my pasture land, right?
You can still mow it and run cattle, yes.
Okay. In other words, like,
fix my fence back there and
I dare
trees
said
and
if you
fall
didn't.
on it, cut 'em without any permits, I mean, you know.
Yeah.
As long
And
as
if,
I-
and if you want, and I, to be candid with you, and I'm not trying to advocate, cause like I said, I got more than enough work to do. But if you feel like you got something that you just got an uneasy feeling and you don't, call me, submit a letter, get it back in writing. I can tell you that the sky is blue and the sun is green. That don't mean diddly squat unless it's in writing. I'm sorry, I'll go back to my inheritance, I'm part Native American. If it's not in writing, it don't mean anything.
Right.
So if you've got a queasy feeling, and I'm not, if it's something to do with the Corps of Engineers, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of other folks in here who do a lot of different things, and everybody here's a professional at something. And I don't mean, or even try to tell you what your business is. I'm sure you could tell me more about running cows than I can even imagine. But the situation is you turn to them and put the onus and liability there. You wanna invest where it needs to go.
Yeah, we planted in the grass, you know, and I mean,
Yeah, see,
I
I mean,
know
like,
it floods, but I mean, water stands on it, when we get a big rain and
Yep.
stuff, water stands on it, but
well,
it goes down, the grass is still there, you know?
Yep, if you look historically, in this whole geo region, it was primarily a lot of cattle land. There's between forest and cattle land, and what you end up doing is, NRCS had a thing called the PX, where they label it in their alphabet soup of the lands, and it was a forested area that was undergrazed by the cows to keep the woody vegetation down, so you didn't get encroachment of a lot of the invasive species. Standard practice, okay? There's no discharge of fill. I ain't involved with it, I ain't got a dog in a hunt, and I don't wanna get involved in something I ain't got to say so about.
To get a permit to put in a culvert, where do we go?
Corps of Engineers, Galveston District.
Okay, if we know it's wetlands, do y'all still have to come out and do a determination?
Nope,
To
you
get a
can do,
permit?
it's on up, we got some more slides that we end up doing that. There are different types of determinations. There's a, what they call a preliminary determination. And what that means is that if it looks wet, it's wet, because I ain't got the time to sit around here and wait for Uncle Sam to get back to me. I need to get something done, and I need it done yesterday. If it looks wet, we're gonna say it's wet, we're moving forward, we don't care, we need to make a timely decision.
How long
That's
does that normally take?
Preliminary? You send me the permit application, we start working on the application immediately.
But it sounds like what you want to do is put a road in.
The culvert.
Well, not a road, kind of replace a bridge to get more vehicles across.
Well, the only thing I was saying is we have a nationwide permit for transportation projects. You may fit under that, and if you fit under that, it's a 45-day time frame. But then we receive a complete application till the deadline when you can do the work.
But the preliminary, to answer your question about determination, again, pregnancy test, yes or no. You're ready to go. The delineation itself, you wanna make sure that wherever it looks potentially wet, you're going to the extreme sides. The highest boundary that you can, that looks like it might be wet, and that's where you're moving forward. And that's what you're sacrificing, quality for quantity. You're trying to get it done in a more timely manner.
I heard you guys talk about Uncle Sam and this ruling that took place August the 28th. What can we do to help when we do talk to our congressmen and our senators to specifically help out with this? Because this is totally absurd. I mean, you guys don't have enough help. People are waiting a year, that fouls up our real estate sales and et cetera, and buyers and people building property and adding to the tax base. I mean, this is crazy. So y'all have any advice for us, as some of us that can help?
I think just what you said, tell your congressman what it's doing, what it's causing, and, I mean, like Kenny said earlier, it's funding. We don't have enough funding to get enough people.
And take it a step further, you're seeing some direct impacts with it. All right? August 28th was the enactment of what they call the Clean Water Rule.
Wait, clean water what?
Clean Water Rule.
Renewal?
Rule.
Rule.
Yeah.
Yeah, this notebook has that Clean Water Rule. It made it easier for us, is what they said. All right?
I don't think you mean that.
They mean we don't agree.
We're building this airplane as we're flying. The situation is, does it change our jurisdiction? The answer is yes. To what extent, I can't tell you yet, because we're still trying to
Make
chew
it
it.
up, huh?
This is a mouthful, and I'm trying to chew it.
Right.
And how does that affect you? And I'm sorry, this is a bureaucrat, I told you I'm gonna take, too stupid to lie. I can't tell you where it's all gonna come out. And that's why I have to take a look at it case by case and bring these things up and say, you did what? How is this gonna do what? Now, how does this affect the public? And that's really what it comes down to. Go back to what I said, the intent and purpose is to water quality. Physical, biological, chemical integrity of the nation's water. Did somebody create a situation where they threw the baby out with the bathwater?
Mhm.
Maybe. I can't answer it. I ain't smart enough. I got people above me that tell me what to do, and again, I'm in the military. I say, yes, sir.
So if you own land in Hardin County, you just need to get a determination on it, if you want to sell it.
I would recommend it. I don't care if it's Hardin County or wherever it is. If I,
But that's where most people are from.
well, I understand
Well,
that
I mean,
now.
if you're gonna sell, if you have a farm and you're gonna sell it for somebody to farm, I wouldn't think you'd need to do that. If you're gonna sell it and somebody maybe wants to develop it,
Make a
then,
Walmart.
then yeah, you might, or you might, you know.
We done y'all done opened up a big can of worms about all this, so. I mean,
It's been open,
that-
it's just,
I
we're
know
just
it-
now
I know
learning
it's
about
been-
it.
Well, it's been in effect since
72.
72, so, but, I mean, I own 86 acres, and if I wanted to sell it now, well, I better get a determination and have a 5-year determination on it, is that right?
I'd
I mean,
recommend
if I-
it because
if I
it's
plan on
marked.
selling in the next 5 years.
Well, I'd have to turn to one of my real estate people and say marketability wise. If I have one that's unknown and I have one that's definitely known, which one am I gonna be able to market better? Which one's gonna sell better?
The one determination.
And that's where
We're
you.
gonna start advertising, you know, we've already had it checked out, hey, it's good.
Well, and
Check.
I know that in other counties, that's one of the things that they end up doing. When they address environmental encumbrances, they say, are there any waters to the US, any wetlands, anything like that, anything that I need to worry about? And the reason this becomes important is it just doesn't start there. Once Uncle Sam gets in the door, say you trigger a need for a permit, we're gonna take a look for other parts, like the Historic Preservation Act. Do you have a cultural resource site on there? Is there a Native American burial ground? There's an old mill plantation? Is there an endangered species concern? We gotta take a look at it. All of those things come into play the minute that we get triggered, because we can't issue a permit that's in violation of any other federal law.
One thing I'd like to point out, because we need to get ready to cut him off, because we're moving him to the Trust Center. These guys tonight, they're gonna be over there at 6 o'clock in Lumberton. But Brian Babin is very much aware of what's going on, and his, staff, Lanny, and I can give you their phone number if you'd like it. Her name is Lanny, and the number's, 409-883-8028. And like I said, he has been very much involved, and so has James White, and, I think if Colonel Pennell was here, he would just love Mr. White. So,
Colonel Pennell is our colonel, the
Yes.
full-bird colonel that John and I have to answer to.
I got a question for you. Was this, this new August the 28th bill, was it, passed by executive order, or did it go through Congress, or do you know how it got passed?
It went out on public notice. What happened is they proposed it a year ago. EPA and quote-unquote Corps sponsored this bill, went out for public notice. Congress looked at it and went through executive rulemaking. Now, there's two writers in Congress right now that are to kill the bill.
Who are they?
No, the two writers that are actually being voted on, they're being debated on the floor at the present time. There's also some litigation issues in 17 or is it 18? 18 states. There was a federal judge who ruled and put an injunction on it.
No, there's an
13
injunction on
got the
13.
injunction.
There's another 18 that have filed a suit,
Right.
and they've requested an injunction.
In
Texas
Texas,
was
they
not
filed
one.
one in Texas and Galveston on
but
September
we don't
8th.
have the injunction.
We
Texas
do
does.
not have the
We're-
injunction.
We're one of the 18 that is trying to get one now.
Right.
And
So that will kill it, or stop
We
it?
go back to our old.
it'd go back to what was beforehand. And, all right. I'm gonna get flogged for this.
Turn the recorders off.
Because again, I'm too stupid to lie. A recent interaction that promulgated a lot of interaction and concerns. A whole lot of angst. Had to do with a road nearby here. And some development along it. Now, I don't know all the ifs, ands, or buts, nor do I want to. All I can tell you is what I investigated. We went out and we looked at it. There are wetlands in that area. Yes. very clear. Were some of them filled? Yes. Was it a violation? No. And the reason it wasn't is it was beyond our jurisdictional realm. That being stated, preliminarily, and I emphasize that I've not done it, and I haven't been asked to do it, and I don't want to do it officially, but I will if I have to. If I had to investigate it under this new rule, would it have been wetland? Yes. Wetlands didn't change. Would there have been fill in them? Yes. Would it have been a violation? Yes. It changed the jurisdiction on that one. How does that affect others? I cannot answer that. I've tried to take a look at this. I'm telling you point blank, I go to the same places you guys go. I need to know how this is going to affect us, or will it not affect us?
So in Hardin County, would that be the Eastern District judges, federal judges?
The federal, right now, the federal judge is because it's all into the same district, the 5th district, federal
Fifth
judges.
Circuit?
Yeah, 5th circuit. So in Galveston's where it's filed at right now. And I don't
So would
remember
we,
what
in
judge
Hardin
it is.
County, would we want a filing in the Eastern District of Texas, which
Probably.
goes from Winnie to Texarkana, which
It'd be-
encompasses Hardin County?
I'd be telling you stories. I ain't a lawyer.
I'll
one
call
filed in-
Lavin's office and ask them, because Lanny's up on it. She can
Cause I
go.
know all the federal judges very well,
Good.
and I will definitely.
That's, I need all the help I can
Don't
get.
mention our names.
I'm
I may be looking for another job, and you guys need more people then.
Not against you guys,
That's-
I get it.
I want you guys to be, in all fairness, you're citizens. Dadgummit, you need to know what's going on in your backyard.
Teresa, can you give everybody Laney Brown's phone number again that's up on this for Dr. Babin?
Okay, hold on. 883-8028. 409-883-8028.
I wanna make a comment if I could.
Please.
If it would've been for our floodplains administrators, the people in Hardin County, we would really be lost. They've helped us through this procedure, and I've been satisfied with it. I think Hardin County is way ahead of the curve.
I would agree with you.
And our county commissioner, and everybody's involved in this, we're the growth area, but they're up and ahead of this curve. And I've lived in a lot of other areas that are gonna have a lot of problems if they don't do the same.
Well,
So I do appreciate that, and I wanna say that.
I'd agree with you. One of the things, and I'm gonna parrot some of your attaboys, and that is, when the situation I was referencing earlier about the wonderful investigation, I spent time, whether you won't believe it or not, camping out in the woods with some of these folks. I mean, they were side by side sweating and feeding skeeters. The difference of making that jurisdictional call was one day. One day. If it had gone another way, it would have been a different story. And that's because of the proactive response. When it happened, there was a whole lot of graphic metaphors that were being used. Not by you, but I'm saying by other folks, and told us where to go and how to get there and a quick way to do it. But because of the prompt interaction that was going on, it made the difference. In this situation, it made, as you just heard me say, it made the difference between a violation and non-violation. And that has to do a lot with your support of these folks over here. And I'm gonna work the best I can. I've got the staff, I got limited staff, and we're doing the best we can with what we got. But it's important enough, as you can see, John told you how many people we got, and both of us are over here today. That's how important it is for us to share this information, to be proactive. If you got too close to us, or you may look at our britches or whatever, you notice that we got mud, and we were out doing work this morning before we got over here. And we got more work yet to do. But this is important. It's really, really important, because it's a whole lot easier for us to be proactive than reactive. And I cannot say thank you enough for making time to come and visit with us and express your concerns. I wish I could fix all the problems and make them all go away, but I can't. And maybe I am one of your problems, maybe I'm not. But you take a look at the blessings that we do have, and it's still some of the best stuff going.
Well, I appreciate y'all speaking to us, because I know a lot of federal
Yes, thank
agencies
you.
wouldn't even take the time to answer phone calls, much less
Yeah, like I
come
said,
down here.
well, you're more than welcome, and if, I like to think that your tax dollars actually work in some places, and this is one of them that it does.
Kenny? can
Yes,
you-
ma'am.
Can you tell me specifically, what about the new rule changed it from a no to, we changed it from a no to yes? Is it the 1,500 foot, is it the 4,000 foot, is it the
Yes.
significant nexus test, or?
Yes, all of the things you've
all-
mentioned.
All of the things.
Right. What historically is, under the Rapanos decision, what we were doing prior to the new rule, is one of the things we had to look at was adjacency. Yeah, leave that. Don't show them the violations ones. The adjacency situations, what it historically meant was 33 CFR 328, it had definitions of what waters of the United States were. The new rule changed those definitions. And those definitions previously were looking at adjacent wetlands, and it had adjacent defined as being border, neighboring, or contiguous. That didn't change. But they refined the definition of neighboring and made it, tried to quantify it to make it easier for people is what they're stating. That's the approach. That's the federal government's approach. I shouldn't say they because I'm part of that government. And what they did is they quantified it with some areas in and of themselves. You talked about certain measurements. In that rule, it does have measurements. Is it 100 foot ordinary high water mark? Is it 1,500 foot? Is it 4,000 foot? Depends on if it's in a floodplain, if it's not in a floodplain. A lot of those areas, many of those areas were historically isolated and not subject to federal jurisdiction. Because like John had mentioned, the Swank case, there was no interstate commerce to tie it back to the federal government. But based on quote-unquote science and recent studies, these actually do have an effect on that, and as such, they've included these areas to make it easier for the public to understand and there's a clear-cut, bright line.
So that would be 4,000 feet from the high water mark of a navigable stream.
Right. Now, one of the things, an A1, yeah.
A1 through A5, so it
No.
could be a tributary too.
So it could be a tributary too.
And
Okay,
one of the
so
things that goes
4,000
with
feet.
it, yes ma'am, and one of the things that goes with it, now, you're being very limited because there's, you know, you can't have one shoot fall, you have to have two shoots fall. And there's what they call the A7 waters, which are called Texas Coastal Prairie Wetlands. And if it's in there, you have to look at everything in that watershed to determine if everything in conjunction has an effect on it. What does that mean? I cannot tell you at this point in time because I don't fully understand myself.
So is it possible that an injunction or this is going to go away, so if someone is sitting on land that is on, the Neches River, maybe they wanna wait till this goes away before they actually.
If it goes away, right.
If it goes away.
Now, there's a pro and a con with that, and that's a good question. And the pro and the con is, if I go ahead and get it in the pipe, and I get a response, I have that. If it goes away, can I get it redone? The answer is yes. Because the new regulations kick in. If I have an old determination, and if you did this, I'd have to doubt some of your sanity. But if I had an old determination that was done prior to the change of the rule, and you sent them in a new request and said, hey, I want a new determination based off the rule. All right, well, we'll go out and make a new determination based off the new rule. That's your prerogative. But we have to make it based off of the contemporary knowledge and what the rules, laws, and regulations are.
Basically, he's saying if you get a JD and it says you don't have any jurisdiction, let it ride.
Well, unless you want us back in the
Let it
business.
ride.
But if you don't have a JD and you need one,
Then,
maybe
then,
wait and see what happens with this.
yeah, you're betting though. You're betting on time and you're betting on what they're gonna do.
And you're also betting on us and our resources getting there. Because if you get it in there, no offense, but you put it in the pipe right now, and it may take us 6, 8, 10 weeks to get there, all right? By then, the rule may have changed, so we're gonna make that call based on what's existing. But at least you're that much further down the line.
And you can always request another one if you get one that's jurisdictional and you think it may be, and they change the rule or revert back and you think it might not be jurisdictional, you can always request it another time within that 5 years to get another determination.
Is there any part of Texas or southeast Texas that's not a Texas coastal prairie wetland?
Good question. I can't answer that.
We're still waiting on that final
Actually-
definition.
Actually, some of that discussion was supposed to be occurring today while we're over here.
are they gonna clarify that rule, or are they gonna leave it this way so that they just?
We've been told, checks in the mail, we're clarifying the rule. Our guidance has been, this is very straightforward. We're getting questions and answers responded to. And I'm not trying to be obstinate, but I'm sharing with you the honest truth. I can't answer that question at this point in time.
We reviewed their proposal. We had some other thoughts, and we sent it back, and we haven't heard anything back.
Until 2016, we're stuck.
Do what?
Until 2016, at least, we're stuck.
Unless there's an injunction.
I don't know.
I'm not even gonna speculate on that. Depends.
These riders that are being voted on that can kill
Yep,
some of this might make a difference.
they might, but some people, one of the things that's really great about this country, now you got me on a soapbox and I'll be political for a second, is that your voice does make a difference. But many times things happen. I've heard, can't tell you how many times today, this has been going on and nobody ever let us know. Well, we're trying to share. Is the system broke?
Yes.
Opinions vary. But the thing is at least you can say something about it and make your voice heard. But if you don't say nothing, you can deal with it.
This issue of the Clean Water Act is very political. You have the Home Builders of America who want it to go away, and you have a lot of environmentalists, the National Wildlife Fund and all that want it. So the wildlife people want it to cover everything, the home builders want it to cover nothing, and they're
Same
both giving money to Congress. So how do you think that works out?
In a federal court, in the same court, it was filed for both directions in one day. One filed against it saying it was too liberal, and the other one filed against it, said it was too lenient. Well, what in the name of Sam Hill are we at? That's why the judges get paid the big bucks. Yes, sir.
Still, about 120 days from the time you get the letter until you receive
That's
it.
But I've got 14 or 15 over here. I did 3 today, so I'm gonna come back in probably a week or two and try to knock out the rest in a couple of days. If y'all want something, please get it to me in writing. I'll try to take care of it.
And I have to throw out
I've
provided.
already submitted.
What's
to
your
you.
name?
Got a number, but I don't have the number with me.
All right.
Then I probably got it. If it's not on top of the road, it's mine.
Top off trail.
I'm sorry.
And
It's mine.
now I have to inject this, and that's provided that the federal government doesn't shut down in a couple days. Because if we don't get a budget, we ain't got a job. And John and I've been around long enough that we've been through that dance before too.
How cheap will you work for?
I'll be needing to work. I'll be available.
You'll be an environmental specialist.
Kenny,
Yes, ma'am.
in that 4,000 and 1,500 foot, is there still room for your expert analysis for a judgment call? Is there, or is it all just any more than 4,000 feet?
Now, what, the difference, go ahead.
Well, if it's not within 1,500, if it's within 1,500 feet and the floodplain, it's automatically in. Okay, if it's out that, in between 4,000 feet or out of the floodplain, within 4,000 feet, you have to do a significant nexus on it, and that's where you have to come up with a single point of entry watershed to the nearest traditional navigable water. You gotta identify all the like aquatic resources within that single point of entry watershed, and then you've got 12 factors that you do a significant nexus on, sediment.
So
It's
something
a
that's out of the 100 year floodplain, out of the 500 year
Yep.
floodplain, but that shows some sort of, channel or stream or erosional feature due to water. It's your judgment on whether that is.
Well, it's not necessarily gonna be our judgment, it's gonna be what we can find evidence-wise.
And the significant nexus, we have to send to the EPA, and if the EPA agrees with us, fine. If they disagree with us, then I guess they'll be able to elevate, yeah. And they can claim jurisdiction when we think it's not.
One of the things I want you to bear in mind, you keep going back that 1,500 and 4,000 foot. Remember what I just threw in that wonderful wild card called this Texas Coastal Prairie? That's taking a look at everything. That distance don't make a difference at all. I'm trying to watch my tone here. It don't make a difference at all. It's what it does is it'll look at what you heard John say, the single point of entry. You hear this acronym SPO, and that's what it stands for. And what it does is it'll look at everything that's in a drainage catch basin. It's like a big teardrop and how it comes down. And you look at all of those aquatic resources of that like and how it affects that waterway. So if it all is in that Texas coastal prairie, your 4,000 foot ain't gonna make a diddly worth of difference. That's what I really want you to bear in mind, is that there are some clear-cut distances that that regulation talks about, in the guidance, the rule. But they also have that, what's called the A7 categories, which is Texas coastal prairies. And that distance doesn't make a difference.
If we don't have any more questions,
Well,
remember you can, oh, you're gonna go ahead and.
I was just
go
gonna
through
say,
it?
this is our address. That's John, that's John. This Kenny, that's Kenny. Andrea Davis is we didn't even talk about permits. And I know a lot of folks, a lot of questions. We're gonna get even more into this tonight too. Andrea Davis is the team leader for looking at permit evaluations, and Janet Botello is her supervisor. You can contact me and John. We all work in the same office. There's a segregation of duties. I think I need to tell you real quick the way the segregation of duties is. The way Galveston District is set up, compliance and enforcement, John, me, and our staff. We usually do the enforcement actions, recorded enforcement actions, and all the determinations and delineations. So we're gonna be the boots on ground typically. The permit evaluators are the ones that we need to determine that you do need a permit. They're the ones that are gonna take a look at it and evaluate for what type of permit and run through the procedures and determine whether a permit's issued or denied. Alright? So we're trying to, I'm not trying to stovepipe it, but what we're trying to do is increase efficiencies, and it may sometimes not see that way. But if you have a question regarding the permit thing, you can still call me and John.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you can give me a call, I'll give you my phone number right now. Y'all want it? 409
766-39.
766-3933.
Your email, their emails are also on that handout that we gave you. That would probably be a quicker way to get in touch with them.
Email or phone call, I try to
And
return
if it
my
gets
phone
really
calls
bad, they
promptly,
don't call you
so.
back, I have cell phone numbers.
Do you guys need a residence here?
I wish.
Find a house?
My extension, if you wanna get a hold of me, John's always better than I am because he's, much more politically correct. Last four digits of 3985. 409-766-3985 is my direct phone number. And there's always an answering machine there. And I will return the call just as quick and promptly as I can.
I don't give out.
I hope not. My wife gets a little upset when that phone rings at night. Who's that on? Some strange woman calling you at all hours of the night?
Irate Hardin County people.
Jay. Jay from State Farm.
What you wearing, Jake?
But remember, when you send in a request for determination, it's gotta be written. Don't send me an email. Don't send John an email.
Cause if you email me, I'll email you right back saying I need a letter signed, and I'm sure I have to some of y'all.
And it has to be the landowner, or if you're under contract, you can be.
We need the liable party.
Okay.
I don't want somebody getting shot for trespassing.
You have to have some
That's
type
bottom
of,
line.
you have to have some type of vested interest in the property.
Oh, okay, so it has to be by
If
ourselves.
somebody's got a lease on it, I'm running cows on it, that's fine. I just don't wanna get me or my staff going out there and getting shot at. It's happened before and I don't want it again.
And if you're not under contract, we'd need it from the property owner.
Right.
Anybody could request it, but you'd have to have a letter from the property owner stating,
Here's
I'll
an-
allow the Corps to do
So
it.
the buyer can
Yeah.
request it?
As long as they have,
Under
The
contract.
letter from or they have a contract or a letter from the
Right.
seller?
I don't
Or
know.
both?
either way.
Either way, we just
Oh,
don't,
okay.
like I said, the main thing we're looking at
Either
is
way.
legal issues and liability for trespass.
Yeah, like if you call up and say, hey, I want you to do a determination on my neighbor's property, see if they have any wetlands over there, we can't do that.
Yeah.
But if you call up and say, my neighbor's filling in a wetland, we're gonna investigate it.
First I'm gonna say, have they started work yet?
Yeah. Here's an
If you say
example,
no, then I'm gonna say, call me when they start
here's an
work.
example of a map of what we're looking at for the project areas. Remember when I was talking about the wetland hokey pokey? Don't send us something with a little star here, because that doesn't mean anything to me. It's great if I'm shooting a scud missile.
Mhm.
But if I'm wanting to know what the project area is, I need to know what those boundaries are. And aerial photos, many times they're very clear cut. I may have a power line easement running across here, and there's a fence here and a fence here. Okay, great. It lets us get out in the field. We are definitely a field people. Like I said, doing the wetland hokey pokey, my left foot in, my right foot out, it makes all the difference in the world to get the answer. I want to be able to give you the answer that you want. Remember, we were talking earlier about building a house? Say that we come out here and these indeed are wetlands, but really what they want to do is build a house right here. If you sent me that request and asked for a jurisdictional determination, I'm gonna say, yeah. It didn't answer your question. But if all I wanted to do is build a house here, just send in, draw the square there and send me for that. A 5-cent question, get you a 5-cent answer.
Or if I'm out in the field with somebody and on a piece of property and there's some wetlands there, then I'll tell them, well, hey, what are you gonna do? You know, if they say, well, I want to build a house over there, I say, well, okay, you send me a map with these new coordinates on it and I'll answer. And that'll give you the answer you're looking for.
What about the road to the house? You draw that on there?
Yeah, yes.
The whole thing, the whole project, whatever, and that's an important part, is what is a single and complete project. Sometimes we get developers who've got a lot of money or they're land rich. We need to see what the single and complete project is to determine permit requirements. You can still design something through here without impacting in wetlands. If you got a delineation, remember the determination versus delineation? And it goes back to what are we looking at? But understand that once Uncle Sam gets in your house, he goes through all your drawers. And what I mean by that is if there's an endangered species here, that's gonna get played into that permit review, and it may be issued or denied. So, once it triggers, it's like inviting a vampire in. Once they're in, they're in.
Easiest way is to avoid,
And I,
by far.
we can keep going on and on for quite some time, but
If y'all think of anything else that you want to ask that didn't get asked here today, be at the Trust Center tonight at 6 o'clock, because we're going to start all over again, so.
At the,
In Lumberton. That's on East Chance Cutoff behind the, City Hall there.
thank you all.